cybersecurity roundtable organized by the partnership of companies and organizations which are sitting on the table. I will introduce in a second. Just to frame the roundtable, WISeKey has been since 2011 very much involved with the World Economic Forums on all the subjects related to cybersecurity. Not only we are one of the global growth company of the World Economic Forum nominated in Dalian in China, but in plus of that we are members of several of the council, which basically works together with the WEF in developing the agenda on cybersecurity. Not only on cybersecurity, as we also work on what we call the future of technology and the future of the internet. In 2011, cybersecurity was selected as one of the 4 risk of the World Economic Forum predictions. This has been turned a reality. Cybersecurity now is a major issue. The roundtable that we organized in this year expands from last year's roundtable, where we look into a specific issues related to identity management, and we have the presence of the commissioner from the European Union at that time, where she expressed the strong willingness of the European Union to move towards a strong authentication. The objective of this roundtable has threefold. One is to inform you about the situation on the sector. Another one is to give you some feedback from experts on what they are doing in their own respective activities. And the third one is to project the year ahead, as 2015 is going to be a very heavy year what concerns cybersecurity. So we will cover some of the imminent risks that we are all facing and how can we mitigate them. So first of all, I would like to thank everybody for coming today. I know the agendas in Davos are always very busy and breakfast starts very early, so I really appreciate your presence here. Also the presence of the speakers. And without more, I would like maybe to just let them to introduce themselves, so you have an idea of their background, and then we start immediately after the roundtable. So I start with David.
Good morning, my name is David Fergusson. I'm the president and co-CEO of the M&A Advisor. The M&A Advisor is an organization headquartered in New York and London that acts as a quasi-think tank for mergers and acquisitions, and my purpose for being here is not as an expert in cybersecurity, but as an analyst of an industry that's drawing a tremendous amount of attention and in which we believe that investment going forward will have a dramatic effect on the industry sector.
Yes, good morning everyone. Thomas Andersson. I'm a professor of economics and currently based in the Middle East, advising some governments in that region. In this context here, I'm chairman of ICAD. It's a think tank in Sweden, which is one of 8 partners in the so-called GINI project, and that stands for Global Individual Networking. It's a activity that has been a support action with the European Commission, but it's currently in a stage of implementation, and it will connect here to the output, hopefully, of this session. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jean-Bernard Rosin. I'm one of the 3 founders of a global search campaign that we started in France called Quant. I think we'll have time to discuss more. We think that in that area of search, there is a need for choice. Choice for people, choice for company, choice for governments. And also we think that we can do all of that with respecting the privacy of our users, so we don't track them.
My name is Radu, POPESCU-ZELETIN. I am with Fraunhofer FOKUS and TU Berlin. And in the field of the identities, where we were very much involved in the introduction of EID in Germany. EID in Germany is not only EID for the person, but also EID for internet. And we developed actually quite an interesting cluster. The cluster of which is called New Generation ID in Berlin, together with the universities and the different manufacturers from Daimler to Bundesdruckerei, trying to understand the Internet of Things and the necessity of introducing ID in this space. So
Thank you very much. So words from myself. My name is Moreira. I'm the founder of WISeKey. WISeKey is a cybersecurity company here in Switzerland. My previous capacity was as a Chief Security Officer of the United Nations in Geneva for 15 years. So I have been very much involved from the beginning of the World Wide Web and everything which concerns cybersecurity, as we have to first secure governments and then we started to secure clients. The subject of cybersecurity has become a major subject, not only from the perspective of the business itself. It's a $180 billion business now, cybersecurity. It's a sector that's very much concentrated in the United States. The original cybersecurity companies like RSA, Symantec, Entrust, there are many US corporations. Europe has been very slow on cybersecurity and I will say on internet altogether. Very happy to have with us Quant here, because Quant is an excellent example on how European innovation in search, for instance, can become as good as any other. So the challenge is how a market, which is $180 billion market, a market on which some of the countries in the world are getting organized, not only to capture the market, but also to control that market. How can we react towards that? What is the positioning of Switzerland or Europe towards that? Also the fact that cybersecurity is a lot of discussions around the web, but also in the United Nations about the future of the internet. And one of the things people don't necessarily realize is that the cybersecurity element is the one that will determine the future of the internet, because we are moving towards a situation where the internet is becoming a platform, and either you are in or you are out. And although we believe that the internet is it's global, at the end of the day it's not. I was yesterday in a panel here with some experts talking about the dark net, the net that we don't know about it, this net that has more people already than the official internet, where banks are now losing their personal data, where the credit cards are being traded, where the drugs and drug dealers around the world are doing their business. This dark web exists and is there, and nobody's regulating that. And it is impossible for organizations such as ICANN and others to regulate that space. So we are entering into a dangerous world, because the World Wide Web, which was created in Geneva by CERN 25 years ago, was now designed to conduct the level of transactions that we are conducting now on the internet. The internet, the ARPANET, at the time when the Americans developed the ARPANET, was a military infrastructure which was reinforced by a software which was developed by the CERN, that basically provide a mechanism of interconnecting sites in a very easy way without the need to centralize any server, and being able, through that decentralization process, basically to connect as many computers as possible. But identity was not designed on that architecture, neither was designed the cybersecurity element. So I would like to just, again, this panel the idea is that we all can engage, not only the panelists, in a Q&A. So we will go one by one, first asking some questions to the panelists, and after we'll open the floor to the participants. So my first take will be, and I will go directly to the search, and I will go directly to you, because I really believe Quant has done something very interesting. As we did at WISeKey and Identity, Quant has done it in search. Maybe for you to explain us your road map from where you started. What are the obstacles? How has been the reaction from the market? And how you portray yourself as a European technology company versus the big giants in the United States?
Thank you, Carlos. So first of all, thank you for inviting us, and thank you for those kind words. I try to give you a little bit of the path that we followed. We joined together. My background is in finance for 30 years and in investment. My two other partners have, thankfully, a background in tech. One has a B2B search engine that has already top clients in France, and the chief architect is a fellow called Eric Léandry, who has a background in security. 4 years ago, when we decided to create Quant, we realized two things. One has become obvious, and that is that the direction that the internet was taking was far from the original and posed a series of problems. And the direction was that the search engine companies instead of keeping their path, which was to give you unbiased access to all the information that's out there, I decided to create universes, and each of those universes, even if they are very interesting and very nice, have to be less than the complete universe. And as long as you take the path to create a universe, you're going to exclude content that is necessarily relevant for the users. And I'll give you a very simple example. The social networks have become a huge part, everyone knows that, of information that's available on the internet. If you decide not to index social networks because you don't want, for instance, if you're a search engine, that people go to Facebook, people go to Twitter, and if you force the users to navigate by clicking out of a site, out of one universe to go into the other, then you give them only partial information. So at Quant, we decided to break those walls, to open information, and to create one place on which you would have all information relevant to one query. We have several columns, one for news, one for web, one for social networks, and we have algorithm to index and rank the web and social network as well. And we do that, one, protecting the privacy of the users. We anonymize IP. We don't take a record of what they say. And in a nutshell, I will tell you the following: if someone comes to a search engine and says iPad, there's a very strong chance that they're interested in an iPad. And there's no reason why the search company would want to know the color of their eyes, their sexual preferences, and the history of their travel for the past 10 years. It's not useful to give them a relevant answer. So we launched in France, we launched in Germany. The ex-entrepreneur group contacted us about 9 months ago and invested in Quant. They now have 20%. We're going to raise more capital. We are growing, and we think that there is a need for a choice, and we're happy to offer that choice.
Thank you very much, Mike. So I think one of the key points on search is the capability of data mining personal data of users. I mean, WISeKey has been very, very focused since the beginning of our history on dissociating what we call the PII, which is the personal identifiable information. Is who you are, where you live, where your kids go to school, the name of your wife, versus what we call the attribute of the information. So Quant doesn't disclose the PII. PII means that eventually, because in their business model, they will have to make money by selling advertising or selling some search-related activities. They will do it by providing the what you do, but not the who you are. The who you are should be always encrypted. And that's the philosophy also of WISeKey. And this is very much the difference between Europe and the United States in what concerns the internet. European companies are, maybe because we have the history of chip cards where we put an identity on crypto chips, we do have a more, I will say, longer experience on protecting personal identification. In the United States now, what happened last year with the JP Morgan losing their data, Target, Home Depot, and many others, they are realizing slowly that they have to replace passwords. Passwords is obsolete technology. It's so easy to break password. And last week, Geneva Bank has an equivalent problem. The data was totally infiltrated, and the bank was compromised because they were still using password and unsecure email. So it is essential that search companies, together with cybersecurity companies, educate the market as to say you can still make a very big business by selling what you do, because you will need to sell what you do to advertisers without disclosing who you are. The personal identifiable information is something that belongs to the user, and nobody has the legal right to resell your PII. And this is a notion that is slowly starting to emerge. The United States is signing something they call it the National Strategy for Trusted Identities in Cyberspace, which is a White House recommendation that all Americans by the year 2015 and 16 will have a strong authentication. So I am very confident that once we apply strong authentication, once people start to use digital IDs, start to encrypt emails, start to anonymize in search, then you are entering into a way of using the internet that gives you the same benefits that we are having now without compromising your personal information. So maybe on that line, Professor Radu, I know I was with you in Germany, and I had the opportunity actually to have a meeting with the Chancellor and a few other technology companies. So one of the things we discussed was the Industry 4, which is an initiative by the German government to convert their manufacturing capability into technology companies. Basically, the thinking is when we went to see BMW, they said we're not a car company anymore, we are a software company making cars. So that shift on thinking, which is we need to create our own platform, because otherwise other software companies now producing cars like in the United States will get us the market. It's a new thinking. So maybe your experience as you are so much involved into this and so advanced into that domain on the Internet of Things and Industry 4.
Yes, thank you. I think we are experiencing a revolution, industrial revolution nowadays. If you really consider that over 70 billion of devices are attached to internet, and this is actually going on and on and on. Of course, actually, till now we concentrated very much on client-server model and things like that. But actually, the future will be what is called industrial internet. There are also associations, actually, in the United States, which are named as industrial internet. And the idea here behind it is actually to provide internet and identification, if you are in any kind of device or object. So a car is an object, a human being is an object in this space. You have the possibility actually to put things together, try to optimize processes into industrial field. And this is actually the vision of what is called Industry 4.0. This is, the positive part of it. The negative part of it is actually that a lot of discussion in this field is really very, very, from my point of view, very weak in attacking the problems. If you ask people about security and trust in this type of environments, they start to tell you about what is called security by design. And if you are trying to understand what security by design is, well, it's bullshit, actually. It's nothing behind it. So that's actually the problem what we have. I don't, we had actually for years in this space CIM, which is Computer Integrated Manufacturers. What happens now is actually that these CIM were islands, where physically were actually not connected with the whole world. But what will happen now in what is called cyber physical systems, you'll be actually part of the whole world, meaning actually that the attack space is actually the world. So I'm rather interested how things will go on. And actually, the big problem is also that it's not only security from an IT point of view, but you have actually IPR problems where you are attacked from the outside. You can take actually look at it, but also physical security, meaning actually from the outside you can blow up probably whatever kind of plant wherever in the world. So if Industry 4.0 should come, if Internet of Things will come, we have a serious problem of cybersecurity and trust in this environment. Meaning what? Meaning actually that if you have different components and you try to build systems, trying actually to build systems with components coming from different manufacturers, then you have a problem because you don't know actually what kind of security damages you can have by integration process. And it's not very clear that you can, at the end of the day, provide let's say, a complete secure environment for industrial products. So there are a couple of other aspects coming into. One of it is actually that in cyberspace and Industry 4.0, certification of the different components is a must, and you have to have very, very strong certification of the different objects to be put together. The other thing is actually that the problem of security, at least from our research point of view is what is called NP complex. So you'll never find I think a secure solution for that. Meaning actually that we have to start to live in an insecure world and actually learn to live in an insecure world. Meaning actually that you have, if you create systems out of components, you have actually to be able to calculate the risk. The risk actually you introduce by putting together whatever kind of software, hardware components from different manufacturers in a specific application domain. So I think there are a lot of new things to think about in this environment, and Industry 4.0 is really an impact, has a lot of impact in Germany for the industrial type of thinking towards distributed system communication, ITC and things like that. But there is at the present time in the space of security and trustworthy in this field a lot to be done before you will have really secure industrial internet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. So just to give you some more examples there, we are talking about 1 trillion objects to be connected to the internet. Actually, I was just talking to an expert on brain activity. He was telling me the internet is becoming like the brain. You know, every object will talk to each other in the same way the neurons on your brain send signals to another. So we are working towards a world and everything is going to be connected. So people, now we are only connecting 800 million objects to the internet, which are mainly mobile phones. Those are the only connected devices for the time being. Equals to that you have something like 3 billion people now also connected. So imagine the interactions of one person versus object. That is exponentially changes the number of connections that you don't have to secure. For instance, in Switzerland, my company WISeKey started about 4 years ago, working with watch manufacturers. We have already 1 million watches in Switzerland, and they are certified by WISeKey. Means that they have a digital ID. The watch itself has its own digital ID, as you have your passport or your carte d'identité. The watch that you buy from that specific manufacturer has a digital ID. And now we are even going one step further. Friday here at the World Economic Forum, we're going to be releasing something we call WISeWatch, which I have here. This is a WISeWatch, I'll show you later. But this watch is my identity. This watch decrypts my mobile phone. So I send from the watch through NFC a digital ID that decrypts totally my phone. My phone is totally encrypted. If I lose my phone, nobody can use it because the key of the phone is on my watch. So those are very concrete developments that shows that the technology is ready to go. And the good news is that big corporations, that they're investing a lot of money in supply chain management, in manufacturing, they are now willing to put those IDs into their product. So as we are moving towards ID, maybe you discuss a bit the identity aspect, which I think is essential to understand how the internet works. A lot of people don't realize that when the World Wide Web was created, the identity was not even thought about it. Nobody thought at that time that the World Wide Web or the internet will need an identity. Because the spirit of the web by the pioneers of the web was to be totally anonymous. And that has created an interesting aspect. But by being anonymous means everybody can participate, but that includes also the bad people which use the internet for illegal actions. So the identity element is something which is very important, and I think the visions of Thomas on identity and how he has been working all his career on identity will be very enlightening to us.
Well, thank you very much, Carlos, for those words. And I think it's interesting that Carlos, when he was going to describe himself, he showed his watch. There are many different ways of presenting who you are. And when we think of the world out there, it's really a place that's, of course, it's extremely diverse, and in many different kinds of environments, people they identify themselves in different ways. Now, I'm based in the Middle East. Some maybe 1 or 2 generations ago, for sure, you identify yourself with a number of camels you have. Today, the camel has been replaced by the Ferrari. A young man comes in a restaurant, in a bar and so on, and how is he going to prove himself, to demonstrate who he is? Well, he puts his car keys, the white car keys on the table, and it's the smartphone, it's the latest smartphone. And maybe there is some academic degree and so on that matters, the brand of it. This is one way of identifying yourself. The reality is, as Carlos said, that in the digital world that has been developing, these issues were not really addressed from the outset, and they've been hanging in there from all along without being properly resolved. There is a patchwork of solutions, a patchwork of passwords and various identities, incomplete. You need to move towards more of a coherent framework for trusted identities. Without that, you're going to be stuck in a situation we have today with a severe trade-off, in fact, between usability on the one hand and security on the other hand. And I think this is very important to understand. Of course, as Professor Radu says, the world is insecure. We're never going to resolve all those problems and so forth. But you can't be stuck with this kind of severe trade-off that you're faced with now. And the reason we cannot have it like that is all that change that's being described here. In the world of convergence, of big data, of ubiquitous communication and computing with artificial intelligence, this is just not going to work out. Maybe 7-8 billion people online, trillions of devices. So in short here, we had a session last year, and we've had good responses to it. We proposed some new work. Actors, different stakeholders, also from finance, as we will hear about, need to get together with governments and others, and it has to be, of course, regionally organized to some extent, but there also has to be that global connection. So against that, that background, and as part of that process, we prepared a document which we refer to as the Davos Charter 2015. It's a project Dictio, and Dictio, I think Carlos, you were maybe responsible for this, bringing up this term again. It's Greek, and it means network. And in here we take stock of the development that's ongoing. And we propose that those who are interested and who believe in a joint effort on this, that they sign off on this document here today. You have a look at it first, of course, and you can sign later. So this is not, it doesn't have to be done today, of course. And here the undersigners would agree to the importance of mitigating the security risks and increasing trust in the dense digital environment that's underway. And that we initiate effective collaboration to put in place such a coherent system of electronic identities. Not a single set of identities, of course, it's not the point. The point is a system where it works out with derived identities and consistency across the board. And that it operates for human beings as well as for devices. And part of the picture, which has to be with us going forward, is about also putting the users in better control of their digital identities. And that includes how data is being used, how it's being shared. It's not about putting a cap on the data, but it is about having a say and being able to be engaged in that. That's not something that individual people around the world can manage on their own. You have to have the development of services, of operators, who can take the part of individuals. And there we come really also to the heart of the business model issue. It's not about technology. It's very much about people, and it is about business models. And that people request the solutions, that services are developed, that there is professional support for that. That's the only way in which we can pave the way for these solutions. And in there, again, trusted search and other e-services must be part of the picture. And eventually, the objective here is to achieve a coherent system for trusted identities that, again, operates for human beings as well as for the digital devices, and that we get the various stakeholders engaged. So happy to come back to further discussion. And again, this will be put on the table, I think. Jona, at some point here, you can share that so everyone can have a look. Thanks.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you very much. So this year, the World Economic Forum, as you know, the motto is the next global context. That applies to many sectors, obviously, and technology, by the way, is one of the focus areas of this year World Economic Forum. So there's a lot of experts around the city here, around Davos, really talking about what that means, what is going to be the global next context in what concerns the internet. I was yesterday night with Fadi for ICANN. He was explaining me the challenge he has with ICANN now, because ICANN is covering basically domain names, registration now with the Internet of Things. Who's going to regulate that? It's going to be the industry which is going to be regulating that. It's going to be international organizations. Will that be a new organization that needs to be created? Will be the United Nations? So there's a lot of discussions around that topic. To be honest, from my own experience, already something like 30 years working on this, the internet cannot be governed. It has been designed, the architecture of the internet has been designed not to be governed by anybody. It could eventually be regulated, it could eventually be enhanced by technology, and this is the intention here. The intention here is not to bring another organization to rule the internet, because that will never happen. But I think the internet has serious deficiencies that needs to be overcome. Those are technologies that needs to be added. And there are two ways of adding those technologies. You can take the Apple, Facebook, Google approach, which is we create our own platform, you enter into our platform, and then you are secure, and you do everything inside that platform. But that's not the internet. That's their Facebook, Google, or Apple platform. We are back again. I don't know, maybe there are some people in this table which remember IP Sharp and American Online. You remember those times where you needed a password to enter into a private network, and inside that private network you could do a lot of things, but only for the people that had that password. So that's where the industry is leading now. Facebook is going into that direction, and Google is going into that direction, and this is basically will be the end of the internet. If people start to develop their own platforms, which are different and they are not compatible with the rest of the internet will disappear. The governments are taking a very strong stand on the internet. You have now China saying, I don't want to be on the control internet for one nation, we would rather build our own one. Brazilian government is saying, President Dilma is saying the data in Brazil has to be stored at national level. We don't want any more Brazilian data to be stored outside the Brazil. So there is a trend on nationalism on the internet, which is amazing. And the reason why President Obama just said a few days ago that the internet is a utility. The internet is not an infrastructure, it's a utility. So utilities are water, energy, power, nuclear power. Those are things that governments of the world wants to control at national level. You will never imagine to have an international organization providing the water to the rest of the world. Neither you will imagine to have an international organization providing the electricity for the rest of the world. Those are resources that need to be handled at national level. So the experience is that there are many good international organizations that they have been doing that for other industries, like IATA do for airline industry. Every day, hundreds of thousands, even millions of planes take off and land anywhere around the world. And all that is done through international standards. Airports are interconnected among themselves, they have regulations. So we have been able to establish a standardization to complex industries where security and trust are essential. And this is something that we can replicate on the internet. So maybe now, just because many of the roundtable presence here are financial people, and this year we wanted to give a new dimension to this roundtable, is also to talk about the industry itself. What is that industry? How much is in this industry? Who is making the money now in this industry? How companies getting funded? What are the investors coming from? Who is investing in cybersecurity? Are we investing enough in cybersecurity? Are banks that they are now complaining that they got hacked? Did they invest in cybersecurity? Are they investing now after they've been hacked? So the questions around the financial world, discovering the cybersecurity world, is actually very interesting. And we have here with us the presence of David Fergusson. which is very involved in merchant acquisitions, and he runs his own events on merchant acquisitions around the world. What is your take on cybersecurity and the financial world, and how you can help us to highlight those, where are the opportunities there for companies like us?
Carlos, those are all great questions, and I'm honored to be here today to attempt to answer them. I'm actually here in two capacities. I am here as a student, as an analyst of cyber technology, of practice and process. I'm also here as a reporter, as a voyeur looking at this sector through the lens of M&A. We have the pleasure of a constituency of over 750,000 M&A professionals around the world. We have an active faculty of 500. Excuse me. We bring approximately 3,000 of those together each year for in a think tank style environment to discuss M&A and influences on it. And so that's the context that I bring to this conversation today. The core premise of our market intelligence study is that we believe that M&A really tells the truth about industries. As the last of the financial services sector elements to come back to pre-crisis level, we actually think that it reflects it's probably the best indicator of the true economy. We monitor every M&A transaction that happens every day around the world. We study who's doing it, who's investing, what are they investing in, what geographies and with whom are they engaging, with whom are they investing, financing and acquiring. And so we're identifying trends, we're interpreting market relevance, and by analyzing what's happened in the past, we try and present a predictable future. Why are we paying attention to cybersecurity? Well, there's been a tremendous amount of noise about it. What began, as was referred to at Home Depot, saw us looking squarely in the face of JP Morgan not very many months ago and wondering just how much further can this go and how could it compromise our industry. The investment financing multiples, so the nuts and bolts of what we monitored, saw average to above average valuations, and some would suggest that the future may see some of the highest valuations that we've seen to date. And a very interesting investor profile. It's rare that we would see venture capital, private equity, corporations that are already in the industry investing, as well as corporations that are not in the industry, together with government investing at the same time. This is a very rare profile. This, in and of itself, certainly was a flag to us. And we begun to witness acceleration of M&A activity. It's still relatively small. We think it's in its infancy, but the growth between 2011 and 2014 was quite significant. Carlos referenced our events at an international financial forum that we hosted in London in the fall, where we bring together not only M&A professionals but also policymakers, media and academics. Carlos was kind enough to deliver a short cameo address on cybersecurity. And the response that we got from our audience at that event, from the media, as well as from our constituency when we informed them, was really quite overwhelming. And so that prompted us, and very thankfully, Carlos was able to assemble a group of individuals where we hosted a Stalwarts Roundtable session at our annual M&A Advisor Summit in November. And that session is profiled here in this report that you'll find outside the door as well, and there is also an electronic version which will allow you to witness the session itself. We initiated market intel coverage on this industry immediately after Carlos's address in October, and what I'd like to share with you quickly is I'd like to just give you a quick snapshot of the history of what and how it's relevant from an M&A perspective. It's a very competitive and fragmented industry, as you know. There are about 20 companies at the top, primarily U.S. IT and defense contractors. The speed and the disruptiveness of technology is certainly accelerating investment. $5.2 billion invested over the past 5 years. In 2013, there was $1.7 billion invested. There were 23 M&A transactions last year, and not surprisingly, the most active investors are the firms that have consistently backed the tech trends. So where are we currently? Well, I think a particularly relevant number that you wouldn't find in the M&A stats is that the attack cost estimate is now estimated at over $445 billion, and I think we're going to see that number escalate significantly as we move through 2015. 17 transactions done in the first half of 2014 compared to 23 in all of 2013. We're still waiting for the final 14 numbers to come in. Early and late stage investments are growing. Venture capital, which continues to be a key component in this industry, has invested $1.4 billion in 239 companies in 2013. Already for the first half of 2014, there was almost $900 million invested. So we think the year's probably going to finish up around $2.1 to $2.4 billion. This is quite significant, and it's trending much higher than it did for social media in the early formative stages of investment. So what happens going forward? Well, I'd like to share with you our predictions. We think that the threat landscape continues to be very dynamic and multidimensional. We believe that the advances in product quantity and the technology will continue to accelerate. The innovation that we've been witness to over the last 3 years through our intensive focus would suggest that what has originated from small startups and early stage firms, that trend will continue. We are also beginning to see, and I think this conversation and certainly many of the engagements that WISeKey has had would suggest increasing security vendor collaboration. I think that's going to be paramount to the advancement of the industry. Carlos also made reference to the geopolitical factors, which are adding complexity as some foreign buyers are reticent to make investments in or to engage with product or service that may see the data secure in a market that they may not consider entirely secure. What does it mean to M&A? The leaders in the industry today, of which there are 20 top that we're following, in a total of over 500 companies that we're actually watching right now. We believe that they're going to diversify and pursue more competitive advantage by making more acquisitions so that they can provide a fuller, broader cyber service. We think that the improved global economy is going to see corporations that have underinvested in R&D historically over the last 9 years are going to increase their investment going forward. The venture capital industry is going to continue to have a strong appetite. They're already beginning to see significant returns, and I think the future is quite bright for those early stage investors. The IPO market has improved, so that then sees institutional investors playing a greater role in this, who were not part of the original engagement. Private equity, I think, is going to continue to see above average returns. They like the short holds that they're going to be able to realize in this industry, and we expect that the M&A activity is going to grow considerably. Also, I referenced companies outside of the sector are beginning to make acquisitions as security becomes more important to them. So it won't just be the large security companies that are investing. So in conclusion, the growth of M&A transactions in the industry is directly tied to the risk of cyber attack on the financial performance of corporations, governments, and individuals. Cybersecurity management, we believe, is forecast to be one of the fastest growing industries in 2015, and we certainly don't anticipate the risk of cyber attacks abating in the foreseeable future. And so, to come full circle, M&A and investment activity will accelerate the solution development and the application process, which in turn, as those of you in our industry know, will continue to foster more investment activity. And I think has been true through the ages that safety and security really does not have a price threshold. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Radu, for a comprehensive report. Just maybe to land this on very concrete facts. You know, I mean, we have here two entrepreneurs, Jean-Manuel and myself. I mean, he has been raising money all his life for companies before, and now for his own company, Quant. I was myself, I've been raising money, WISeKey. I raised $100 million here in Switzerland, mainly with high net worth individuals, and because Switzerland is not yet organized very well in terms of VC, so you have here a very different type of investors than you will have, for instance, in the United States. And now WISeKey has announced an IPO end of Q1 this year with something like $300 million being raised in a roadshow. And following very much the example of a very interesting success story like FarEye. FarEye is an Israeli company, cybersecurity company, pre-IPO, something like $200–350 million valuation. Now they are trading at $4.9 billion valuation after making the acquisition of Median Technology for $1 billion in the United States. So obviously, one of the concerns for entrepreneurs is obviously to develop your company, but what are the exits? Exits are shareholders want exit strategies. In cybersecurity, the problem you have is that it takes a while. It's not like a social media company that you start and suddenly you have 100 million downloads and then you are quoted for being $70 billion like Uber is now in the United States. This is kind of a different world. To be honest, cybersecurity, you have to build the infrastructure, get the trust attached to it, get the confidence of your clients, and only when you achieve all that, they start to build the valuation. But maybe some comments from Jean-Manuel. How difficult is it to raise money now in Europe, and what is the exits for European companies?
I think that's really an interesting point. I know, of course, the French system and the French situation much better than the rest of Europe, but in France, there's a very big effort to build an ecosystem, and actually it's quite successful in Paris and in many regions, in Nice, in Bordeaux, in Rouen, in Amiens, in Angers. It's very interesting. There are lots of initiatives. There's something called French Tech, and there's a lot of startup, a very big effort to build this ecosystem. And funny enough, those people in our government that I have met that are working at this are fantastically bright, extremely hardworking. They put out 14 hours, and they are not dogmatic at all. I mean, Axel Vermeer, who's the Secretary of Digital in France, is 36 years old. She's half Canadian, half French. Emmanuel Macron was 36 years old. These guys work very hard, and everyone understands that there is a need for this. But the venture capitalists are still, I think, a little bit single-minded and only look at the B2B type of model where they only understand, I would say, all the accounting rules, and they looking at your income statement before they look at anything else. And in the case of some startups, it's not exactly the right criteria. And the other key point, I would say, systematic for Europe is that there is a need for an exit market, and there is a need for a much more liquid stock market for companies. I would like you to say, Carlos, I understand very well why you go to Nasdaq, it's a great idea, but in a way it is not normal that you would have to go to Nasdaq. There ought to be a place in Europe where companies like WISeKey should list, and there should be investors willing to take that risk then. And I don't know how to build that, but if that existed, that would be a very big advance for Europe.
Absolutely. By the way, we have Switzerland is a very active market. It's Swiss Stock Exchange. We have with us the CEO of the Swiss Stock Exchange with us in the round table. So there's many ways of doing it, but I guess what requires, as I say, is it's easy to find money for a certain size of organization, but you don't have necessarily the VC community that builds that. What about Germany? Germany is Berlin. I was so impressed about Berlin being the hub of startups in Europe. What is the success of Germany?
No success. I wanted actually to intervene in this question because actually my institute is also involved quite a lot in entrepreneurship. We actually had a couple of, over 20 companies on the market, and we had a couple of exits in M&A. Funny-wise, actually only with American companies. So in the M&A process of our companies, we were always an American company, not an European one, which is one aspect you have to understand, that actually this type of exit, M&A, is very, very rare, understood by the big industry in Europe. I don't know how many M&As per year makes Siemens, but I think actually not more than probably 1, 2, or 3 per year. at least what I know. So this is one aspect. The other aspect, which is in Germany quite interesting, is actually that American companies are coming and create accelerators and innovation kind of hubs. Cisco just opened one in Berlin, where at the same time it's called innovation in their new FOKUS technology, trying actually to capture around companies in this innovation. Microsoft same thing, Google same thing. So it's a kind of way to deal from the American companies trying to enhance their potential future M&A, hopefully. Which is typical for at least for Berlin. Berlin at the present time, it's also another aspect is the fact that till now the government didn't understood actually what's going on. So there is no support. In France, is much more support towards kind of entrepreneurship and things like that. And the last aspect in Germany is that there is not only German companies. There are a lot of Israeli companies coming, a lot of American companies around there. So it's a kind of nice mixture in Berlin, actually, of different companies. Even, as you know, our friends as a Swiss company are around in Berlin, which makes actually quite interesting environment. And I'm saying not successful because actually I don't remember except SAP a success story in one lifetime in Germany.
Absolutely. So thank you very much. Maybe I would like to open the floor to the audience. So if you have any specific questions in any other subject or any other subject that you think is relevant to this roundtable, please. Maybe tu peux circuler là. Merci.
Thank you very much. My name is Philippe Monnier from the Greater Geneva-Bern area, which is economic development of Western Switzerland. I have a question about standard. I understand that one of the challenges of cybersecurity is to have some standard, if possible, global standard. I would like to know what is the role of ISO, if any, in this issue.
Yeah, actually, it's a very good question. ISO, we had security expert has always dreamed to have something like an ISO 9000 certificate for cybersecurity, right? The only problem with that is that because cybersecurity is so broad, it could come from so many different ways that is nearly impossible to come up with a standard. I mean, you can come up with standards or specific issues on cybersecurity, for instance, identity management, interceptions, access control, but it's very hard to get some kind of label. Well, one other thing which is becoming now a trend, especially now banks, and they are losing data, like in the United States, is actually creating a phenomenon where consumers are taking legal actions against the banks, and they are saying, the fact that you lost my data, it's a negligence from the bank, therefore I can sue you, I can take legal actions against you. So banks are concerned about that, because now banks, or anyone in particular, view cybersecurity interceptions as a liability, which is actually a good news for the industry, because that means that the bank doesn't see that anymore as we need to have that because that is nice to have. It's actually, we have to do that because it's a must to do, otherwise, or board or CEO might get in trouble. So now there's a new set of companies like KPMG, Deloitte, and others that they are moving towards providing an audit, a cybersecurity audit, which is the same way you audit your financial company and financial performance of the company, and you have a third party that has to audit that for you. You cannot be self-audited by yourself. The trend in the market is to have a cybersecurity audit, which is also conducted by a third trusted party. And that audit should be published in the same way that you publish your financial audit. It's only at the beginning. It's coming from the United States. I think it's something that will be very interesting to deploy also here in Europe. That will activate the industry, that will allow the industry to be more visible. And maybe organizations like organizations that you have in Geneva, like SGS, like standard bodies, could become very much active on that.
Hi, Carlos, earlier you mentioned that passwords are obsolete, and that's something that I hear, I guess, frequently. And yet, I'm constantly entering in passwords. I'm a partner at a hedge fund firm to access all of our information. We protect it with passwords. What are we going to be using 3 years or 5 years from now? What is going to be the evolution on this? Is the answer, will we all have a digital identity in a watch or some physical implement? But what is the next solution? Because for something that's obsolete, it seems very ubiquitous.
Yeah, that's a very good finalization of the thought. Yeah, I think, I mean, there's a normal evolution from password to digital identity. A digital identity is actually very easy to install. You know, when you have HTTPS, it's a certificate, and you have to install in your computer that secures your communication browser user, and that is 128-bit encryption, which is enough to neutralize 99% of the hackers. The other element is to add a X509 certificate, which is a file. I mean, you can download that for free from WISeKey website, and you create a digital ID. So you have to answer a few questions at the beginning, but that digital ID is then stored into your mobile phone, into your browser, into your Outlook, and every time you have to single sign on anywhere, you don't have to do anymore with your password. Basically, you will still use password to create the identity, but you can be very complex password because you don't have to remember those passwords anymore, just once to create the identity. And once you have the identity, those passwords are not necessary to create. The password is still behind the digital ID. But in front of the transaction, you're not showing the password, you're showing the ID. It's like being shielded against the attack. So to be honest, it's like, I will call that like washing your teeth every morning. It's basic cybersecurity hygiene. Everybody should do it. It's so easy to do it, and there's absolutely no reason why, and it's not expensive. It's something that anyone can do. The problem is, as you said before, is that people are still on passwords. So they just don't want to change the password because the password is so easy, and the education in the market has been let's use password. But to be honest, I think this year this is going to change. 2015 is going to be a radical year on compromising password, because before I needed a very strong attack to break your password. Now I can break your password in your mobile phone from my mobile phone from that distance. I can put now software that is reading your Bluetooth transmission, and I can intercept your password from my mobile phone. And we are in front of a meeting or having a coffee or having a lunch, and I can break your password. I can enter into your email, into your personal data. So I think passwords needs to move on. And there are some companies that are coming with intermediary, with this OTP, one-time password, which is a technology like RSA. Then you have to add a serial number, a random number, which is generated randomly. There are ways to do that if you want to still keep the password. You don't have to be forced to do it with companies like WISeKey, but it's a very strong advice to move out of passwords. Yep. Sir.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, you have the microphone. Sorry.
Tim Noonan, International Trade Union Confederation, here with the Labour Leaders Group. You talked earlier about the exponential growth in the number of devices and the massive anticipated growth in the number of people who will be connected to the internet. And the day will come soon when more people will have internet access than will have a toilet in their home. That's a reality. And that's causing some, it's a wonderful thing, there's no question about the value of extending internet penetration, but that's also causing some consternation within security services and so on because of the potential for cybercrime and even cyber conflict. The interests of personal cybersecurity, the cyber elements of national security, private enterprise cybersecurity, and non-profit cybersecurity are not synonymous. and often in conflict. So I'm very interested in how those elements can be reconciled in building a common process. And from an investor point of view, does the concern that governments are increasingly expressing about cybersecurity introduce some risks for investors who are particularly focused on the individual cybersecurity, in other words, the hiding of identity?
Very, very good question. Maybe Thomas, you want to answer part of that, and then I go, so I'm not only one.
Well, so again, I mean, it's not a question here about homogeneous solutions and putting every eggs in one basket and all that, and you certainly don't want to stifle innovation and development of new solutions. So the point here is that you need to get to a system that's coherent and that allows for informed choices, and that there are operators out there that are providing services. And that leads back also to the previous remark on ISO, and certification is needed. There need to be actors that are procuring solutions, and individuals cannot just be hanging in there and not having any information of that sort. They need to be helped in that way, and different kinds of organizations would have their different specialized sort of ways to go about it. So again, it's about the system and that you get it coherent.
Yeah, I think one trend in the market is, that's my observation, in line with government's role. The amount of money invested in cybersecurity is ridiculous, historically. I mean, we are now seeing data being projected over 2015 onward, but if you see on the past, you only have maybe 4 companies, then there are Symantec, RSA, I mean 4 companies covering the number of devices that you mentioned. Actually, for instance, Symantec or RSA do not cover security at all for devices. Their main business is SSL and its website security. They don't even have what they call Class 3 certification, which is identities. They cover that very little. But so that's why companies like WISeKey or FireEye or those companies are hot now, because there's nobody in the market doing this. But it's too big even for a company to handle that. I mean, without somebody putting a serious investment on securing the infrastructure, and only government can do that now, it will not work. So now what is happening, and this is, for instance, Microsoft launched a project with the name CityNext, which WISeKey is partner of it. And CityNext is putting cities to compete against cities to become cybersecurity hubs. So the model is the following. I was with Governor Perry in Texas just a few weeks ago. I had a meeting with him. He told me, I want Texas to be an intranet. I want the Texas state to be an intranet on the top of the internet. So we have a level of security that is higher than anywhere else in the United States. So multinationals then will come to Texas as economic promotion, will invest into Texas because they will not need themselves to equip themselves with the level of technology that the state already offers default. So this is a new trend. I think what is going to happen is that cities in the world are going to become cybersecurity hubs. The city is going to invest, is going to provide bunkers, is going to provide cryptography, is going to provide high-speed fiber optics, is going to provide random generation using quantum cryptography, which is already available. All the things which would be impossible and too expensive for one company to acquire will be provided by the city. For instance, in Geneva, we have something like 100 banks. Imagine each bank now investing something like $20, $30 million, which they will have to invest tomorrow if they don't want to be hacked after tomorrow. How are they going to do it? Where are they going to find the talent? Where are they going to find CSOs? Where are they going to be able to acquire the technology? It will be too late for them. Wouldn't it be easier to those banks get together and say, okay, let's create a city hub, and we will connect to that city hub as a way of defending ourselves towards the internet. So that's the new trend. And I think that's the future. So cities will compete against cities, and there will be an economic reason for investing in cybersecurity, because as a city, you will be able to attract more people, companies, universities, and others, then we create cybersecurity clusters. So that's where I believe it's going to come. Yeah, Marshall.
Yeah, just one question. If I'm the citizen on the street, I know nothing about security, as you know, because you are all expert in this industry. And when you look compared to the computer, where you have Intel inside, which has been a big marketing tool to develop the power for computers, When you see something like that coming, saying that I buy iPhone, I buy an iPad, whatever, and then there is a WISeKey inside, and I'm sure that security is accepted, developed, and then the citizen of the street can be completely secure. When do you see this happening? Is that something can happen like that?
Yeah, to be honest, I would love to be tomorrow, you know, but the problem, I give you an example, you know, I developed a very high-end security app with iTunes, Apple. I had something like 35 million downloads very fast.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly Apple shut me the app out of iTunes.
Uh-huh.
They didn't want me to compete with Apple.
Okay.
And that's what people don't realize. People don't realize is that when you are using an iPhone, you are not using a phone, you're using a terminal to a platform which is run and controlled by Apple.
Mm-hmm.
And Apple will not let you do anything without having their consent.
Yeah.
And the industry is moving that way. I mean, Google has the same thing with Google, Microsoft has the same thing. So these big corporations are creating platforms on where you are just a terminal to that platform. So third-party software will not be authorized because they control the platform. That's why there is, and this is the end of the internet. I mean, this is, okay, you are an Apple and I am a Google and now we cannot even talk.
Mm-hmm.
So the only way to reverse that logic is by the organizations that they have engineered the internet, like ICANN, like the Internet Society, like these organizations, to bring cybersecurity, like what Tom is proposing now with this memorandum of understanding, to bring cybersecurity at the ground zero level of the internet. So the identities are embedded. So therefore, then iTunes or Google platforms cannot block you because you will be downloading that directly into the OS of your mobile. This is not done there. And this will take a while. I mean, you have big forces, you know. I mean, these guys are making a lot of money by being a platform. And they need to make every time more money because they are on this kind of quarterly reporting. So for them, they have to, I mean, what Facebook is doing, Mark Zuckerberg is doing with internet.org. He's going around the world saying, we are helping poor people in developing countries to connect to the internet and we're going to connect 6 billion people. The reality is he needs those 6 billion eyeballs in order to get Facebook growing. Otherwise, Facebook will disappear in 5 years' time. So their agenda is to make money. It's not to help the world to be interconnected. This is a total different agenda. There's a money unique agenda.
Okay.
So I think the only way to counter that is organizations like Quant, for instance. Quant, now you imagine that Facebook tomorrow doesn't like you anymore. You don't need that. You can go to Quant and you can do the search in Quant.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that Symantec tomorrow says, so Apple says, we don't like you anymore. You can come into WISeKey, you can get all digital identities and protect yourself. So I think this is a new trend of companies that they are emerging, that they are not locked in those platforms, that they offer you the same services, but you need the consumers to realize that this is an option in order for these companies to become the next players.
Yes, good morning. Stefan Moreira, Caixa Capital, we're VC in private equity, about $1 billion under management. This is a super hot area, obviously, but some of the issues that you've raised are really critical for our investment decisions. It's extremely difficult, particularly in such a hot area, to choose what will be, the winning horses of the industry, precisely for what you've mentioned. So the lack of, open platforms that are, easily accessible, so that we can actually identify which will be, the components of the platforms that need to be addressed to the market. So in your opinion, or the panel's opinion, where should VCs like us focus on the different segments of the security industry? Because nowadays everybody seems to be doing little bits, but then if you get shut out of Apple, there's no point on investing on 35 million downloads if they're going to be shut out because of Apple or Google. Where should we focus?
So maybe I just do, and after I open the panel. Actually, what Apple stopped us to do was to download the app, the application, but not the identity. Because the identity is an X509 standard run by an international telecommunication union. It's like 3G or like UMTS, those are international standards. And Apple or Facebook has absolutely no way to stop that. So for us, the mechanism of downloading our ID is compromised. Because if I do it through an app, then obviously Apple can block. But the ID itself it's not compromised. Actually, I have WISeKey, so it's something like 4.8 billion browsers already, root keys being embedded. Every time you download a browser, you download WISeKey OS. So the forces there are for VCs not to be maybe, and this is maybe a criticism of VCs there, you get just following what shines out there, right? And maybe project yourself in more strategically to say, okay, where Facebook is going to be in 5 years? Because, for instance, Facebook Connect is the competitor of WISeKey now is Facebook Connect. Okay, just give you a very simple idea. So Facebook Connect is a single sign-on. You download Facebook Connect and then you do whatever you want. But what about if Facebook tomorrow changes the policy on Facebook Connect? Facebook Connect is not your ID; it's the platform ID. Wouldn't it be better to have your own ID that is controlled by you? Then you can single sign on to Facebook Connect and whoever you want. So that's the fight in the market. But I believe if VCs invest, because it's an investment issue now here, invest in creating this alternative, the rewards will be enormous because the alternative is required. I mean, it's no way that the billion objects that are going to be connected to the internet are going to use Facebook Connect. Let's be real, right? So identity management is going to be the next frontier for business. And
in one word also, I would say the billion or the trillion objects that will be connected are an object. And in our technology, we recognize every page that we search as an object, and there will be a need to search out to make sense of all the information generated by all these objects. So you're going to need a search engine in there as well.
And quant search social media. I mean, if you go quant and you search World Economic Forum, you will see in one page everything happens in the web, in Twitter, in Facebook, in social media. So they are aggregating basically data from all the sources.
Carlos, if I can offer one thing, well, I'm more than happy to share analysis. One thing we don't offer is investment advice. But what I can tell you from our research is that those organizations that are collaborating, which is the new trend, those organizations that are collaborating, we believe will be strongest in the future. And as one interesting sidebar example of that, for those of you in New York or travel there, you might enjoy seeing a facility that I was toured by a New York-based technology entrepreneur. And this is a 90,000 square foot incubator and shared space in Midtown Manhattan at 43rd and Madison that is focused on, they've dedicated 10,000 square feet to 100 companies who have been hand-selected from over 2,000 applicants who they believe by incubating can collaborate with one another in technology development and in their advancement as businesses. And then 80,000 square feet dedicated again to businesses who wish to share space together, again for the purpose of collaboration, learning, teaching, and growing together. So I think this is the trend that I'd be banking on.
Any further questions?
I can.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Well, additionally, I think there are actually new domains. You should a little bit look at them. For example, actually, car-to-car communication. It's becoming actually very, very important. Actually, we are working with Daimler, and we know actually what the next E-class will be. Will be actually a car in a flotille of cars. So of course you need identity. Of course you need actually products allowing and provide trust into it. The same thing, if you want, you can think about domains like energy. In the energy domain, actually, you'll have actually smart readers of what happens in your home, and you'd like actually, of course, to have also secure and trustworthy elements into it. And it's a whole productization of the new generation of that. So there are, of course, additionally to what has with ITC to do, a lot of other domains where identity and communication plays a major role in the future.
And the good news is that we don't have a limitation. You know, IPv6 allows you to issue endless numbers of DNS coding for each of those identities. So you can really, with the strength of the manufacturing world, which I think is actually a new thing coming, right? The Internet of Things, or what we call Industry 4, or the industrial internet. they are coming with a total new vision, which is, for instance, I've been talking with EADS, Boeing, all these guys. They're saying, you know, what about if we identify every single piece and part of a plane? You know, when you provide a certification for aero safety to a plane, it's to the entire plane. But what happens sometimes when the plane stops in the scales and there are some products, some part of the planes and they are not working and they are replaced, and maybe they are replaced with counterfeited. I mean, the counterfeiting world is $1 trillion, 5% of the world economy is counterfeited products. So the new trend is putting ID per object. And being able to scan those objects and say, okay, you know, those 3 areas of the plane are not tagged, and we don't understand that. Organizations like SGS in Geneva, which are doing inspections, they're actually moving now to write some process on the top of that, so they can only certify containers and where every single object inside of a container is digitally tagged. So the trend is there. I think what is important to highlight is that there's not a major, you know, identification is like email. It's not something that you can sell it. I mean, it's not a business on selling identification. And I think all the companies that they try to sell identities fail because they try to sell the identity. The business model on these companies, like a case on WISeKey, is not giving away for free and just get ROI in the benefits those identities create for you. Transactions, payment, traceability. And that's the service element that is created through digital identities.
Right. I mean, the point here is very much that it's not cybersecurity and identity management in an isolated sense. It's really about a range of industries and applications, and the untapped opportunity that's out there in health, in transport and logistics, in the smart city context. And there, you know, cities are, as we heard, they are becoming active. All around the world, there's a 200 cities network in China that's getting organized. There's 100 cities network in India, and these are each one of the cities with, you know, 5, 10, 15 million people. And there, also in the Middle East, this is one of the openings for authorities to rethink the relationship with citizens. How citizens are going to become active in working out solutions to water scarcity or energy savings or collective transport or whatever. And in all of that, if you don't get a handle now on that, you know, trade-off between security and usability, and you get authorization, identification of you know, the various mechanisms here, if you don't get that in place, it's just untapped. So, you know, not giving investor advice, but looking for where that really realization of the benefits can come.
Another thing for cybersecurity company from the investment side is the example. I think FireEye was a very good example. You know, I mean, you have a very big innovation of cybersecurity in Israel now. I think meaning hardware, cryptography. Then you have cybersecurity in Switzerland. You have cybersecurity in Germany. But the market is in the United States. I mean, this is where the mature market is. So what is happening now is that cybersecurity companies are moving to be listed in the NASDAQ, like WISeKey and many others, because the market is there. I mean, once this initiative, a national strategy for trusted identity in cyberspace from the U.S. government enters into consideration, I mean, we are talking basically a 250 million market ready to go. The Germans, about 5 years ago, they combined eBay with the national ID card. You know, that was the first project on where you single sign on in eBay using the chip ID that is in your national ID card. And all the Europeans are moving towards having a national ID card. So that means that you single sign on. You don't need Facebook Connect to do that. You have a higher level identity, which is your PII, that allows you to enter into eBay, and that then is combined with your financial attribute, which could be your credit card, and then you can do a payment. I mean, 250 million consumers in the United States are going to be equipped with that technology. Imagine the consequences of that in terms of a business model. So we're getting there. It's just a question to, as somebody said before, is to make sure that those standards are redesigned, because many of the standards that we are still using are old standards before this new market emerged in front of us. So we have to update those standards, and we need to get the industry, like companies like Deloitte, like SGS and others, to teach us what they need in order for them to conduct inspections. And then we are starting to move into a more trusted internet. Yeah, sir?
So, I'm John from Lisbon, Portugal. I own a social media analytics company. And talking with one of the directors at Facebook a couple of months ago, they launched their Facebook login, anonymous login feature for developers, websites, etc. And what they've seen is, although they have some traction, is that the traction is not that much, even from websites and from the user itself using the technology. So one of the challenges of the industry, and the question is, how do you educate the end user ourselves into adopting safe technologies, identities, anonymous logins, so you can create this whole market and industry around it?
Yeah, you wanna?
I don't know. I'm asking the question: are people not using it because they don't understand it, or because they don't trust it?
Yeah. Every time historically, you know, I have been helping many big companies on this. Every time historically, a big company like Microsoft or Facebook issues an identity, they fail. Remember Microsoft when Microsoft launched Passport.net? Was a bit that, right? Passport.net was a way of you creating an identity and allow you single sign-on in all the Microsoft environment. It failed because the platform should not own your identity, even if it's anonymous. At the end of the day, there is nothing anonymous on those identities because Facebook is registering you. The only thing they are doing is creating an anonymity layer towards the service, but they know who you are and they have a relation through the Facebook Connect. So in order, technology-wise, it's very simple. I mean, again, if you use international standard like X5 or 9, you can create your own PII, which is who you are, is your national ID card or your passport, and then you can have an attribute, which I am a developer in Facebook, and that attribute can single sign on with Facebook Connect or with the Facebook developer ID and let you go in. But it's not Facebook the ID. Facebook is the attribute to the ID that you hold and you control on you. And I had discussions. I've been with Chamber. I want to, we want to do e-voting inside Facebook. WISeKey helps the Swiss government to do e-voting. And I say to them, well, many countries will love to vote inside Facebook. Let's do a project together. They love the idea, but when they realized that I was providing the ID, they were not anymore in agreement because they want to own the ID. Their business model is selling your ID. And that's what people don't realize, that those platforms make money on selling identity. They are identity providers. They only capture your identity by getting you hooked into putting pictures and behavior, but at the end of the day, what they do is collect your identity. Actually, Quant does the other way around. Quant could also create an ID because they have your search behavior, but they don't. And this is their decision of not doing it because they want to be different to the market. So I think what we need to have is more companies that provide social media incentives without aggregating your ID. I don't mind then to know what I do. I play golf or I like to ski in the mountains. You can have all that, but I don't want you to know who I am. The who I am belongs to me, right? And that's critical, but it's not their business model. Sorry.
Yeah. You said that in experiments, people show that they do care, but somehow they cannot articulate that in the marketplace. So you have to find those other mechanisms, to make that possible, and that leads us over to all these other kinds of instruments. So I think people do care.
Yeah. So, any further questions? I know you guys are all very busy. Yeah.
Yeah, just very briefly. But when you talk about Facebook, about Apple, when they stop, developing something because you are becoming too big or too
threatening.
Yeah, exactly. Is Europe maybe missing the point? What I mean by that is that the big US companies have not just a big position, they have a huge cash position. Because each time they see something emerging, they can take over. At the time that, in Europe, we don't have big guys for the time being. When you talk about driverless cars, the platform is technology is coming from Israel, technology is coming from the US, or if there is some European guys, they will be taken over down the road. This is possible that the US will continue to dominate, whatever can be the negative of Facebook, of Google, or whatever, and Europe cannot be able to try to face the competition.
Maybe David can later explain us a bit on the US. My experience is, and we had a discussion with Madame Merkel in the WEF, organized a meeting with her. There was Eric Schmidt from Google, and I was there at that table. And one of we're trying actually to find a solution for that. Why Europeans don't make Facebooks of the world? You know, why we are always in a situation that we get up to the sky level and after we sell that to American company. The fact is that we don't have the market. We don't have the market. You know, Europe is totally fragmented. I mean, if I sell technology, I have to do a deal with Indra in Spain because they're a cybersecurity company. Then I have to go to Dassault in France. Then I have to. So we are all fragmented in Europe, and in the identity play, you know, and that was actually one of the recommendations we made last year here when the commissioner, European commissioner, was here with us in this roundtable, is why don't we create an ID for Europeans? You know, why don't we create a consumer ID? Not yet a political ID, because that will be maybe not the right moment, but just a consumer ID. I mean, let's put 400 consumers to have an ID that is a European consumer ID that allows them to do things, you know, buy things, access sites, access cloud, encrypt data, do payments. But actually, that's the type of projects that we need to create in order to have later companies that go to that size. Because whatever you do in the United States, you immediately have a market of 200 million people that you deploy. Mm-hmm. Here, whatever you do, you maximum have is a market of 40 million, 50 million, 60 million. Mm-hmm. And because the other countries don't want you to succeed, because our jealousy in Europe, they will put all kind of barriers before you move into that country. So Europe needs a pan-European consumer play in order to have companies like that to succeed.
Yeah, this is wishful thinking, you know, in certain way. You know?
Yeah, it is. Or you know from the investment side, get VCs, European VCs, to develop the proper funding for European companies. Because I mean, there's a lot of money in Switzerland now with the Swiss franc. You know, Switzerland has $700 billion now in cash reserves, and I'm telling that to the BNS president. Why don't you put money on the Swiss enterprises? Switzerland is #1 competitive country in the world, you know, in the last 5 years. But this is not reflected on the number of IPOs.
Exactly.
So why don't you put your money and create an ecosystem on European company? Everybody agrees, to be honest. Nobody disagrees, but nobody moves. Any other questions? Yeah, Fadi, please.
I just will make a comment. Sorry for arriving late. Sure. I will bring you as a rapporteur a little bit what I heard in the next
Madam, Mr. Fadi is the chairman of ICANN. He rules the internet. He controls the internet.
So just quickly, I want to make the comment. First of all, thank you for inviting me, Carlos. I think that what you're doing is extremely important to what is now happening in the internet. I think we're seeing, as we heard just now from the Edelman Trust Barometer, that the trust in technology companies, for the first time since 2007, is starting to go down. It means that we are getting into the cycle that banking did. In 2007, everybody trusted banking. Now, banking is at the bottom, right there with governments. And now, tech is starting to go down. And I think you and your vision, and certainly the company you represent, actually are efforts to restore some of that trust. Not so much trust, but integrity of the technology sector. So I'm very excited about what you're doing. You know that. I think that all of us investing in giving consumers a mechanism to feel that the anxieties back down, you know, from Snowden all the way to Sony, what we've seen is a complete, continuous erosion of people trusting the tech sector and the technology. And out in Silicon Valley, and I know some of you are from there, I lived there for many years, we sometimes have a libertarian edge that wants to think that technology is always good. Yeah. It's a good thing. The problem is that we're starting to see the people of the world say, we're worried about this. The anxiety level is high. So finding, as I saw in what you put on the table here, encouraging people to work with IGOs and governmental organizations, rather than say run away from them, they want to regulate the internet, but finding a mechanism where technology and public policy meet and we can restore some of that integrity is so crucial. So I commend your focus in that area and the products you bring, which start hopefully turning that trend back to a high level of integrity. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Fadi. For us, to be honest, to have a person like Fadi first, and also to have I can every time, anywhere in the world you do .com, .net, .org, whatever, you're talking to him. To understand that we need to move into a new trust model where it's multi-stakeholder based, where everybody has a say, not only international organizations, but also private sector and a multilateral organization. But to be honest, the first one, which has been totally neglected in the last 25 years of the web, is the user, the consumer. I mean, the most successful companies in the world are the ones that serve their consumers. They provide the consumers what the consumers expect from them. So we have the same responsibility on the internet now that we're going to have 6 billion people connected, is to provide to the consumer something that they trust and they feel integrated. If we achieve to that, we're going to have a total new paradigm in the way the internet is going to move. If not, we're going to have a fragmentation and we're going to keep fighting for the next 25 years.
Just one quick word. First of all, thank you. If I had a slide presentation, you will see that the first thing we do when we present Quant, we say the search engine you can trust. So that's our motto. I just want to say something to the point that you were making. I was last week in the CS Las Vegas. There was a little session like this with maybe a few more people on the future of search, and I was very much linked to the Internet of Things. And the guys at the panel that were very, very bright and very senior guys at very large companies. And at the end, I took the microphone and I discussed privacy, which had been discussed, and I explained that we anonymize IP and how we do things. And then I told them, look, there's a problem that search is presenting to its users a value proposition that happens to be false. The value proposition that search engine companies are giving to the people is use my services that are for free and I will show you the good of advertising. And that is just an outright lie. The reality is, give me all your data, I will mint it forever, and I give you services that you might want. If you don't want them, I don't care because I have your data. Yeah. Okay? And when people realize it will create a rebellion of sort and people will be unhappy. So when I said that, the panel of these super nice and super bright guys was silent. And then one of them took the microphone and he said, it's a problem. I think that what we have to do is to bring better services so that at the end they are happy. Which means that, of course, they don't plan to stop tracking them. The answer is what Carlos is saying, is to separate, of course, the ownership of your identity and the circulation of your data.
Very. So yeah, sir.
WISeKey is developed also, you could use that data and sell it yourself, right? So use my identity online and then sell it myself. I think there's a company who's trying to compete, let's say with Facebook, trying to do that, saying, well, we're gonna create your profile, and then through that profile, we'll use whatever revenues we get from information.
Right.
Yeah.
Sue, yeah. We're actually working with Sue on a project with the founder of Sue. Sue's an interesting model because basically it's a social network where they give 90% of the revenue they get from advertisers back to the users. And the users then redeem that revenue they collect by having their data being sold to foundations or whatever. It's a very interesting model, and I think those are the type of models that are going to emerge. I think we reach a saturation point on how much you can make out of the internet. Let's be realistic. The internet and the World Wide Web has created $1 trillion economy. There are people, there was an article a few days ago here at the beginning of the web that 1% of the population owns 99% of the wealth of the world. In that percent is a very big number of technologists, tycoons, that they manage to make so much money, which I don't mind people making money. I mean, that's normal, but not making money because you are abusing of an infrastructure that was designed for something else. The person I respect more on the internet and the World Wide Web is Tim Berners-Lee. He made no money. He gave away. Imagine if he will have patented the World Wide Web 25 years ago, where he will be. I mean, he will be maybe the richest man in the world, right? I'm sure he will. Because his invention was the platform for a $1 trillion economy. Google will not exist. Facebook will not exist. Any of those companies will not exist if the web will not be developed by this man and give it away to the society. So this spirit of giving away that obviously you need to make money, but money should not be the driver, is a new spirit that needs to emerge. And maybe Davos can help on that spirit, because we have a social responsibility towards 6 billion people, and they are totally excluded and will even more be excluded if you will be, in 5 years' time, you will be in a situation like you have to, like you do in the highways, you know, you have to pay to get in. That will be very sad. So I think organizations like the one, companies like the one, they are learning that point and say, I am also with a lot of shepherds here. Shepherds are the young guys that they are willing to put their time and effort in their countries for free, so they help to a more distributed and open internet. So I am very optimistic as always, but it requires the investment community also to be less narrow on mind, on only making short-term money. There's a lot of VCs now that they have been addicted to exit in 2 years through 1,000 times multiples. The VC community has also to be careful, because one day all this will disappear. You know, I mean, VCs are making a lot of money on the internet, but if they don't refinance the internet for a long term, this gold cash cow will die and will dry up, and then will be the end of the VCs as well. So we need some kind of long-term thinking on this, and put the money on the next 25 years of the internet. So I think, gentlemen, you are all very busy. I don't want to take more of your time. I would like to really thank you about your presence and your inputs. The roundtable is an educational process. I mean, we are later speaking in many other places. We want to incentivize the thinking in Davos, as we are, this year is an important year where technology is going to be debated in length. So just our ideas will be compiled. This memorandum of understanding that Thomas has introduced to you is available for your comments, additions, modification, but let's move towards something that we can put execution behind. I mean, we like to execute on what we say, and I think with the people in this roundtable, the panel, the presence of Professor, the presence of David from the financial sector, and the presence of ICANN, which I think I really like to work with you on that as well, we will make the difference. And the difference will make the difference for the state of the world, which is what the World Economic Forum is promoting. Thank you very much for your time and your presence.